Hello everyone and welcome back to Fox News in the third period. Today we have a really interesting story unfolding. The Truth and Reconciliation Committee just released its final report. We have Noah Fox down in the field at the scene. Noah, what is going on down there?
Hello Fox News. Yes, I'm outside the Truth and Reconciliation headquarters here in Winnipeg, and I'm here today because they just released their final report.
Noah, what exactly is the task of the Truth and Reconciliation Committee?
So yes, they investigate any harm done to Indigenous peoples by the government, and they work to have a satisfying resolution. We're here today because they just released their final report.
What exactly does the final report entail, Noah?
Well, this is actually part of one of the largest class action settlements, and this began in 2007. The final report actually makes Canada implement and utilize the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. 8 years ago, Canada actually denied the implementation of this policy. Canada was only one of 4 countries in the world to do that, along with New Zealand, USA, Australia, and of course Canada. But the final report now forces the implementation in Canada. Not only does Canada have to implement this policy, they must actually deny the truth of the doctrine of discovery and the terra nullius.
Noah, do you mind explaining what the doctrine of discovery and the terra nullius is for the viewers at home?
Of course, I will start with explaining the doctrine of discovery. The doctrine of discovery allowed the Crown to claim sovereignty over Indigenous peoples and holding and land by saying that Indigenous peoples cannot claim ownership of land. It does concede a restricted title, which is an Aboriginal title, to rights of occupation and use. Now, the terra nullius is actually a legal doctrine, and it states that land is legally deemed to be unoccupied or uninhabited, and that allowed for the Crown to grant land to its colonial interests, including 70 to 80% of Canada's land mass that actually went to the Hudson's Bay Company.
Well, thank you, Noah, for that detailed explanation. Now, we are hearing about something called the calls to action up here in the studio, and that are being implemented. Can you explain to us what those are and how those will actually benefit the Indigenous peoples?
So yes, you actually did hear correctly. There are 94 calls to action, all in which benefit the Indigenous peoples. These 94 calls to action benefited their education system, healthcare, and the way they're viewed in society. Some of the more major calls to action is that Canada actually must get rid of the education gap between Indigenous and non-Indigenous children. And they also are required to change curriculum in schools. The new curriculum focuses less on European history and more on Aboriginal history. They also added Native spiritual beliefs into the religious curriculum. All of these clearly provide benefits to their education system, but some other calls to action actually benefit their healthcare. Some examples of this is call to action number 21, and that states we call upon the federal government to provide sustainable funding and for existing and new Aboriginal healing centers to address the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual harms caused by residential schools, and to ensure that the funding of healing centers in Nunavut and Northwest Territories is a priority. This call to action clearly shows that the Canadian government is truly sorry for what they did through the use of residential schools. They not only care about physical health, but they also care about the mental health of Indigenous peoples. Many people suffer from mental health problems due to residential schools. These calls to action encourage all levels of government to come together and make significant changes and to make amends with the Aboriginals for the damage caused through residential schools.
Those calls to action really do help the Indigenous people. Now, is there anything about the Canadian government helping find the countless missing Aboriginal women?
Yes, before this agreement was made, there were countless Aboriginal women going missing for no reason. The final report actually includes a section that forces the Canadian government to investigate these cases.
How many Indigenous women were killed or went missing?
Well, there's actually not an exact number of how many Aboriginal women went missing or killed, but many believe that it actually exceeds the 4,000 mark.
Wow, that is an alarming number. This new policy should bring justice to the families of the missing women.
In the room, they also had a memorial for the 3,200 kids that died while at residential schools. The memorial went by leaving 2 seats empty at the front of the room, and those 2 seats symbolize the 3,200 children that actually died while at a residential school.
That is very thoughtful to have a memorial for people to understand the significance of such loss. What is the mood like down there after the final report being released?
Many people are hopeful that the future of Canada will be better for all. Sinclair said, "I stand before you here, hopeful that we are hopeful that we are at a threshold of a new era in this country, said Sinclair. Many of the people, other people down here, agree with that statement. All Canadians should be happy for the Indigenous peoples as they are getting the justice they deserve.
Now, Noah, how will this impact the future of Canada and the future of Indigenous Canadians?
I cannot say much as of right now, as I cannot tell the future, but I believe that this will give the Indigenous population of Canada a much higher standard of living. They now have a more fair chance to become successful in life because of the efforts of the Canadian government. They now have an equal education curriculum, and Indigenous history is now being taught nationwide. I believe this final report will enhance the lives of Indigenous people in Canada forever.
That is very true. Thank you, Noah, for providing us with such useful information about this topic. This is truly going to have a great effect on Canadian history. Check back to Fox News for any new relevant updates.